help put bodies in the seats like those schools you heard about. But one of the biggest and most important components of all of that is having the right elected leadership that can make it all work. And this afternoon, for the next few minutes, I'm pleased to have this conversation with two gentlemen who have been champions for choice in terms of the legislative battles that they have taken on and won and continue to win and continue to take on in their respective states. To my immediate left is Senator Carlisle Begay from Arizona. He has been a Navajo tribal leader for many years, and he has been at the forefront of working across the aisle, even with the new governor, to make sure that there are expanded educational choice options in his district and community and in the state. And trust me, he has a huge district, one of the largest district in Arizona, one of the largest districts in the country. He put thousands and thousands of miles on his car just to get reelected. But he has gone out of his way to make sure that there's expanded educational choice opportunities with Arizona's trend-setting ESA opportunity, and we'll talk more about that. But let's give him a hand for the work he's done. And then my good friend Senator Brian Kelsey, and beyond that boyish baby face that you see, and look, he's looking at what is he going to say next, is a real tenacious fighter. I mean, we have been working in Tennessee for the last couple of years, but it was Brian Kelsey's steadfast leadership that first put it on the table that there was a need for a statewide scholarship program in the state. He has been steadfast, as I said, to fight the opposition, to take on the battles, to be bold, to be a little bit crazy. And everyone knows when you do this work legislatively, you need a little bit of crazy to get some good stuff done for kids. So let's give Brian a round of applause. Thank you, Brian. So y'all know it's hard for me, but I'm going to try not to talk too much, okay? So I want you to hear from them, but I did want to also acknowledge the work that they have done because legislatively, we can't get anything done if we don't engage the right people who have the courage to step forward. So I'm going to ask each of them, starting with Senator Begay, to just share your journey and how you came to this issue, why it is so important to the people in your state, and just let us know how you came to this.
Well, thank you, Kevin, and thank you for allowing me to be here this afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity, American Federation for Children, for inviting me. By the way of introduction, my name is Carlisle Begay, and by custom in our language, we introduce ourselves in our native language. So, she Carlisle Begay, and she had twatskotni slanki anie bashishin ado a lazatlana the chedo that shanala. My clans defined me as who I am and where I'm from. And I was born and raised on the Navajo Nation, which is the largest tribal community, not only in Arizona, but the largest land-based tribe in the country. My journey into education started very young. My grandfather, my grandparents, my parents always taught me the importance of education. My grandfather only completed 5th grade. My grandmother never went to school. She doesn't know English. She does not write English. And my grandfather, as a leader within his own community, when I was a young, what we call a Chiji Navajo boy, and I grew up in an environment where there was no running water, no electricity, herding our livestock, taught me the importance of education from the foundation, that it's the ladder to success. Senator Lieberman mentioned yesterday this ladder, and it's very serendipitous because there's a song in our Navajo culture, the song called the Educational Ladder to Success. And for me, that importance was taught very young. It was always expected of me to go to college, to get an education, and more importantly, to come back and make a difference for our community and for our people. Unfortunately, my success in terms of having the opportunity to not only get a great education, but also the opportunity to go to college is more the exception rather than the rule. Within the state of Arizona, I represent the largest legislative district in the state, very rural and a lot of tribal communities. And the tribal communities themselves, there's a high dropout rate, low graduation rates just from graduating high school. And so for those of us who have the opportunity to go to college, we're very few and far between. And so the mission that I'm on is to give every student, every youth in the future of our communities the same opportunities that I've had and the same opportunities that I feel will move our communities forward. My grandfather taught me that our communities in Arizona are not so isolated anymore. He would tell me that our community, our nation, you are competing with the rest of the world. How are you going to compete? And so it always stuck with me.
Senator Kelsey?
Well, my answer to this question is really pretty nerdy. I actually was just in college, and I was an undergraduate student, and I had an advisor who was an economics professor, and she told me, I understand that you want to study politics and political science, but you need to also get a major in economics. And I said, great, and I did that, and then I was given the book, Capitalism and Freedom, and I read that as an undergraduate student, and I thought, I believe in markets in various other areas of the economy, and why not apply it to the educational realm as well? So that was my first introduction. But then I'd actually been working in this issue for a couple of years before I think I realized that I really had a much more personal connection to the issue of school choice. And that was because I first introduced a school choice bill in Tennessee back in 2006. So thank you for the baby face comment. I appreciate that. I'm not sure how much longer I'll get to keep that comment. But that's been a while ago. But I'd been working on the issue for a couple of years before my mother, who's always very astute and who's a school teacher of 30 plus years, told me, well, you realize that you're the product of an opportunity scholarship. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, she had taught in the public school system both before and after I was in my school year age, but also for most of the time that I was in school, she was teaching at a private school, and she said, you went to school and scholarship at this one, and then they had a reciprocal agreement with with your high school, and that's why you didn't get to play baseball when you were in the 10th grade. That was basically it. I thought it was simply my lack of the ability to hit the ball, but it turns out it was a little bit of a scholarship issue also.
We've seen this as we travel from state to state, and we work very hard to make sure that we let people know that we're front and center for the kids. It has nothing to do with political partisanship, but of course, as you know, in your respective work and roles, political partisanship is often, the rule of the day. And so how do you transcend the partisan politics that we see in both of your states, and we see it around the country, to try to elevate this issue to one in which we can all come together? Brian, why don't you give us your thoughts?
Well, that is a great question. It's something that we've been struggling with a lot in Tennessee. From the partisan standpoint, it's not the only question that you have to answer, but it is often, when someone's going to vote, it is often the first question that people are going to ask is, well, who is the sponsor? Is this someone who's in my party or not in my party? And so you have to deal with that whether you want to or not. If school choice, for whatever reason in Tennessee, was simply not on the radar screen at all when we had a Democratic majority in the legislature. But now that we have Republican supermajorities, we still have been unable to pass, granted by only 1 or 2 votes, but we still have been unable to pass a program that's focused specifically on low-income children. And that's another partisan issue as well, is that I'll have many of my Republican colleagues who say, this isn't going to benefit anyone in my district. Why would I vote for this?
So let me ask you this. I'm going to pull this out a little bit, because we have seen, and it's often expected, that when there are super majority Republicans in the House and the Senate and a governor, then it's easier to get these bills passed. But the experience in Tennessee Tennessee tells us differently. Why is that?
Again, because it's not necessarily a partisan-only issue. It is an issue that cuts across party lines more so than I think most issues do, and it also just takes a body of legislators who are informed on the issue of school choice and who care passionately about it and who care passionately about ultimately students who are not necessarily in their district.
Yeah. Senator Begay, what about your perspective on the partisanship?
Well, I think that the reality is our kids don't align with any political party, and I've kind of taken that perspective into the way that we look at these issues, and I think it's very unfortunate in Arizona in particular. We look at issues, we debate issues, and especially educational policy through an us against you perspective and an us against you mentality, public education versus school choice. And largely my argument, and especially my district that I represent, is saying that there is no such thing as school choice. There's a lot of misinformation from advocates on both sides. Typically there's arguments saying, well, 93% of the kids in your community choose public education. And I said, yeah, that's true, but only because there's no other option. There's limited options. And so I've visited these schools, the limited number of school choice programs that are in our communities, and see the outcomes that they're producing. There's a higher proponent and higher rate of graduation, a higher rate of those students graduating, going to college. And it's amazing to see, more importantly, the expectation, the vision and goals of these students, and the aspirations that they have for themselves and their community. Governor Jindal mentioned last night in his speech that we are an aspirational society, an aspirational community. And unfortunately, in many of the communities that I represent, sometimes the aspiration does not exist. The hope of communities in many of the states around the country where maybe there's high poverty, other social disparities that exist, and culturally there's many of these communities a lack of hope and vision. And I think that school choice, part of the element of success is the component of involving the community, involving the parents. It's not just the system. It's not just providing them great teachers, great Common Core standards, or not, whatever standards there might exist, or great curriculum. There's so much more to education. When we've looked at outcomes and quality outcomes, high expectations from teachers and high expectations of these teachers from their students is a great indicator. So is community and parental involvement. So when I look at public education, it's not an us against you mentality. My focus really simply is improving education, period, and trying to unpoliticize the debate.
Yeah, but you're a Democrat, as am I, and we have both found, and I want you to share some of your perspective on this, that the school choice, the education choice issue is highly toxic among most Democratic Party caucuses. And so how do you deal with that when your party leadership comes to you and say, you should not be on this bill, or even more importantly, don't do this, and there's those veiled threats or what, and I know you've, without even talking to you about it, I know you've experienced some of those pushback conversations. So how do you deal with that when you're confronted with that?
Well, I'm still trying to pull out the arrows from my bag from this past year. We passed the ESA Empowerment Scholarship Account program in Arizona for all communities, reservation residencies essentially. And a lot of it fundamentally for me is, in the way I gauge the decisions that I make, is simply by the ability to make decisions on the fact that if I can go back to the communities that I represent and explain to them why I made the decision I did, or why I voted on a school choice initiative, or why I pushed a school choice initiative, and the benefit that it represents to the communities, maybe I made the right choice. And so I don't look, when I went into the position that I hold now, I made a promise to the communities that I represent and to myself that I will not look at issues through the lens of our political ideology, but rather look at the issues for the merit of the issue. And I've developed this character of people, saying, "Oh, he's a Dino," a Democrat name only, but
Dino, okay.
but the communities I represent, they know that I'm a huge advocate for education. That is why I love my job the most, is working with the youth and talking with the youth. And a large part of that is I'm trying to instill a passion in these students, in these communities that I had and that I've had my entire life. I'll give you an example. In fact, a couple months ago I spoke to a high school program about civic engagement. It was in the White Mountain Apache tribal community. Very high rates of poverty, about an 80% unemployment rate in this community. And I was talking to this classroom, and there was a student way in the back who had his hood and a hat on and just kind of sat. I like to pick on those students. And we were talking about civic engagement. We're talking about, I like to talk about the future in these classrooms and to the youth. And I asked some questions, and the response of one of these students stuck with me. He said, "Why do I matter? I'm treated as a third-class citizen. My family have always been treated as a third-class citizen. Why do I matter?" The way I look at that is trying to change that mentality and culture, and school choice and the opportunities and the expectations and the environment that supports getting these students to believe in themselves is a part of that process.
And it's interesting. I do think that, be you Democrat or Republican, if you take a stand on these issues that may be contrary to your party caucus or the political winds at the time, that one of the things that does help steer you is what you alluded to, where your community knows who you are, knows what your passions are, knows you have credibility, so they know and understand that you are doing what you believe. But even in the wake of that, Brian, sometimes we need more profiles and courage. I mean, there are people who really can afford to take the political jump to vote for issues they believe in, and yet they refuse to do it. I mean, how do we deal with that dynamic out there where people who may even be in a safe legislative district, they intuitively know it's the right thing to do, but we've had countless conversations around the country with folks who refuse to do it.
Right. Well, I remember I did a media training before I first ran for office, and they told me, if you're ever going to be on TV, just know that 70% of the reaction of the audience is going to be purely based on the physical aspects of it and what you look like, and only 30% is actually based on what you say once you get on television. But the lesson for that was, though, is don't fight that system, but just learn to try to work with it and work in it. And I think the legislature is similar in the sense that we all here in this democracy, we want to think that legislators they vote based on hearing full information and then being told what is the most compelling argument, and then they follow the greatest reason, the greatest logic when they vote. And that's just not the way it works. It doesn't work that way. And don't try to fix the system, because you're not going to change it. It's always going to be irrational how legislators vote the way that they vote. But just you just try to work within that system and see what people respond to. And for most people, I think it's for most of us in the legislature, it's simply having someone in a particular field that you can trust, and you will just go with that person's opinion on most issues, because we cannot be experts on every single issue that's out there that comes before us. So we have to have a few key individuals that provide markers for us to follow.
Well, in terms of key individuals, I think I would like you to sort of update us on where things are in Tennessee, because there have been, efforts to get this program going there. We've been so close. I actually think if we ever made it to the floor, we would get it passed. But one of the challenges we've seen in Tennessee, in your state, is that some of the legislative leaders have not stepped up. I mean, what would you say to them if they were here? And we are taping this.
That's right. I would say you're doing a great job, except for on this one issue, right? I mean, I think we also have to be realistic as well, though, that it's not just leadership, though. I mean, you have to go and get votes one by one. And we did actually take a step in the right direction in Tennessee this year because we actually passed a bill that will provide scholarships for students with disabilities. So that's a huge step in the right direction. I think it changes the mindset now in the Tennessee legislature that, yes, we are open to school choice, and it's just a matter of time before we're able to move this into different areas. But again, you really have to go one by one to each member and try to convince those members that this is going to be a good thing for those students, and it's going to be okay. Their school system, their public school systems are going to survive. You still have public schools 25 years later in Milwaukee, and they still exist, and it's not the end of the world. But it is tough. I mean, politically, it's tough. I mean, we had, I guess 3 years ago now, when the Senate Majority Leader pulled the bill on the Senate side, our low-income scholarship bill first passed the Senate in 2011, and so then the following year, or actually it was 2 years later, in 2013, that Senate Majority Leader pulled the bill and then blamed it on me. It was Brian Kelsey's the reason we don't have vouchers in the state. I thought, well, there's the turnaround, because I thought I was the only reason that we were having this conversation, but now I'm the reason we don't have them. Okay, well, that's fine. And then we came back another couple of years, and then this past session, even this year, the governor's chief of staff said, okay, fine, we'll pass the voucher bill this year, but it will not have Brian Kelsey's name on it as a sponsor. Okay, thankfully he just announced last week that he's no longer going to be the chief of staff next year, so I'm really happy about that. But these are tough issues, and I think at the end of the day, you just have to find people who are willing to vote for it because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, well, you may be either blessed or cursed with having that role that many in the greatest generation had, where you will storm Normandy Beach so once someone else can rebuild the town. I mean, that's just.
I think that's
right. Just sometimes the way it is. We're going to take some questions, so if you have any questions, Matt's out there. I do want to, if you raise your hand, Matt will bring a mic to you. In the meantime, Senator Begay, I want to ask you about something that I have seen when talking to Democratic caucuses or African American caucuses or Latino caucuses, when we talk about the urgency of the issue, and Betsy alluded to it, that's sort of the theme behind this fight and Ed Revolution. There's a sense of urgency that transcends, the 3 to 5 year school reform plan that may or may not work, and oftentimes doesn't work in many of our urban school districts. How do your colleagues respond to the sense of urgency? Because you've talked about that in terms of the Navajo Nation. There's a sense of urgency when you talk to that kid who says, why do I matter? And there's a sense of urgency in terms of getting these kids in quality schools. How does the Democratic caucus, your colleagues, respond to that argument?
Well, I think that it's not an easy issue. I think in Arizona we have a Republican majority state. So on our side of the aisle, in order to get anything done, you do have to extend an arm and a hand across the aisle and get support. And a large part of that for me, and within the caucus that sometimes differs, is my position, to me personally, isn't a position based on the importance of title or the position itself. I don't look at decisions I make based on guaranteeing my re-election, because I could really care less if I'm re-elected based on the decisions I make, because I believe in what I'm doing. And the urgency stands behind it, because there are kids today that are falling through the cracks, or we're failing these kids. And I've heard a countless number of stories where kids give up. They drop out, and we call it the lost generation. There's a number of lost generation youth in our communities. And so the urgency for me, and there was a great comment made yesterday about this is not ed reform, this is a revolution. And I see that school choice is a part of the overall picture and the success that it potentially represents for these communities, and giving them a chance, giving them a hope, because education will be a foundation for the future of these communities.
Are there any questions? Anyone in the audience? All right. Let me ask you both to talk a little bit about where you see things going in your state. I know, Senator Begay, you've been pushing an expanded ESA, and you helped bring that to the tribal nation. And where do you see things going, and particularly with the new governor, who seems to be energetic around this issue? And I know you formed some alliances with him. So give us a preview of what is coming down the pike in terms of the Arizona legislative agenda as it relates to educational choice.
Well, the governor has a huge school choice initiative. I mean, he's been very public about wanting to expand school choice options, and there are variations of what that represents. I think that part of the perspective that we try to balance, especially on the moderate and the Democratic side of things and the discussions, is to say we need to work in elevating all systems of education, and so not just discriminating against one system or another, not really trying to move away from the us against you mentality. So there is a number of policies that we're working on to expand school choice. The ESA program that we passed this past year for tribal communities will, I believe, expand a lot of those options. There are a number of schools that near or on reservations that have said they'll double enrollment, which is great. But you know, this process is not going to happen overnight. It'll be an ongoing fight, an ongoing battle, but you know, as long as we're moving in the right direction, change doesn't happen easily, and I think we're just continuing to press the mold and advocating, you know, just for me, on the premise of quality education, period.
Yeah. Brian?
But I definitely see that Tennessee, as I said, is moving in the right direction on school choice, and I still feel confident that we will pass a bill to provide opportunity scholarships for. Will your name students be on it?
No, don't answer that.
That's right. That's right. It's more likely now that we have a new chief of staff, anyway. But you know, I mean, we literally came up one vote short in one committee last year, and then we got 3 new committee members placed on the committee this year. So we thought, okay, well, this is going to be the year. And it turns out, you know, those individuals needed to be persuaded as well, and they weren't there. So we were basically, once again, we're only one vote short in this one committee on the House side, and the Senate is very strong in Tennessee. We have a solid record going back many years now of being in favor of school choice. We have a governor who's publicly in favor of it, and the Speaker of the House and Speaker of the Senate who are publicly on board as well. So I think that this will happen in Tennessee. It's just going to literally take going, you know, one vote at a time and going to members and convincing them. And again, the legislature is it's not a logical place. I mean, I sat down with one of my colleagues, a House member.
Delete that part out of the program.
I would second that. It's a zoo. It's a circus.
All right, add it back.
I mean, my colleague, he's from my same county, and I said, why won't you vote for this bill to help these low-income kids? It's largely going to be in our county, the students who are going to benefit from it. Granted, they're not from your district, but they're from our county. And he said, well, my superintendent of my suburban school district, he doesn't want me to vote for this. And which, you know, I mean, unfortunately, that's something that you hear quite often as a response for it. But then he said, but I'm going to vote for the one for disabled kids. And I said, but that's the one that your superintendent really hates. He really hates that one, because that actually will affect his district. This other one for low-income students, it will not affect his district at all. But yet, you know, he voted for the other one and not this one. So, as I say, I think a lot of it's just educating people and getting them comfortable with the idea. And it's never going to be an issue that's going to really move elections and get people elected, I don't think. But I do want to say thank you to American Federation for Children, and thank you, Kevin, for having me on this panel as well, because at least it is an issue that is on the radar screen in Tennessee now. Before, no one was even talking about it. And now, when they do run polls, granted, school choice is not at the top of the poll when it comes to the economy and jobs and things like that, but now at least it's a question that's asked. And I think that is, again, an important step in the right direction.
And as you know, one of the things we're proud of, that we support candidates who support the issue and support kids, and we support them on both sides of the aisle. And it's good to know the one candidate who held things up in the committee, because, you know, there are always these, it's always good to know, let me put it like that. Because I do think that sometimes, as Campbell says, and part of the theme of this summit is we got to be ready and willing to fight and make sure that people understand, because it's sometimes we suggest or think that it's going to be a logical discussion where the merits of the argument are going to win out, and as you said, you called it a circus, didn't you? It doesn't always happen.
It's like high school all over again, I think.
All right, folks. Well, look, if there aren't any other questions, let's give them both a hand for their leadership. Thank you so much. And I want to again commend you for doing what you're doing. I want to commend you both for working hard to extend yourselves, you know, beyond the aisle, political aisle, because I do think that is important as well. And both of you exhibited a willingness and readiness to do that. And we're honored to have you here at our summit. So thanks again. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
So, before I conclude and ask my good friend, who, like me, is a recovering politician, Jabbar Shumate from Oklahoma, who will give us the concluding benediction, I did want to take this moment to briefly make a special announcement on behalf of the board members of the Alliance for School Choice. As the Alliance enters its second decade of empowering parents with choice in education, and to create a consistent and stronger public brand, our 501c3, which for many years has been the Alliance for School Choice, will soon be known as the AFC Growth Fund, or the American Federation for Children Growth Fund. Why the AFC Growth Fund? Well, it's simple: to grow the movement. We want to make sure, as this discussion suggests, that the laws work for kids. We want to continue to break down the barriers that discourage high-quality school expansion or creation. We want to design high-quality bills so these gentlemen can promote them, and we want to educate the public and policymakers and make sure that every eligible family is aware of these options. We're very proud of the legacy associated with the Alliance for School Choice. We know that we will continue to grow that legacy with the AFC Growth Fund, and I want to thank the board for their visionary leadership in making sure that we are consistent with our messaging, consistent with the brand, consistent in doing what we can to empower children. And with that being said, I would like for the board members of AFC to please stand and be recognized. You've heard from some of them today over the week. Thank you so much. I also want to give a personal shout out to all of the staff of AFC who made this happen. Thank you all, everyone. Please, if you all could, just raise your hand. I would call out names, but y'all just had a birthday, so I'll be forgetting names. So, but thank y'all so much, and especially for helping me make me look good up here and remind me when I don't do so well. But with that being said, we hope to see you again next year in Washington, D.C. for our 7th annual National Policy Summit. And as you can tell by this one, I'm sure that we will lift up the issue of what's important for kids and make sure that everyone who participates gets something out of it, and they see those stories of success based on the work that you are a part of. So thank you all again, and I'm going to ask Jabbar to come out and close this out. But thank you so much for all your time.